Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're throwing on our medical detective hats and diving straight into one of the most frustrating, misunderstood, and frankly, life-altering medical mysteries out there, Irritable Bowel Syndrome, or IBS. We're going to look at exactly what is happening inside your body, and more importantly, we're going to figure out why your medical tests keep coming back completely normal when you are literally in agony.
I mean, just imagine this for a second. You're in severe, debilitating pain. You are absolutely convinced that something is terribly wrong inside of you. So you go to the doctor. You get the blood tests, you get the scans, maybe even a colonoscopy. And then the doctor sits you down and cheerfully says, "Great news, everything is perfectly healthy." Wait, how is that even possible, right? You're suffering, but the tests are completely clear.
Well, let's break this down by looking at hardware versus software and what we call the faulty alarm. To really understand this, think about the difference between two types of issues. Conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, are what we'd call hardware issues. If a doctor looks inside, they can literally see the physical damage, the ulcers, the inflammation. It's totally visible. But IBS? IBS is a software issue. Your intestines might look absolutely pristine, but the misfiring nerves are acting like an incredibly oversensitive fire alarm. It's like a sprinkler system flooding your entire house just because someone toasted a piece of bread in the kitchen. The house isn't actually on fire, but the alarm system is glitching out. That is IBS.
And this brings us to the complex axis between your brain and your gut.
What's really wild about the software glitch is that your gut actually has its own dedicated nervous system. A lot of people call it the second brain, and it talks directly to your actual brain through a superhighway known as the vagus nerve. Now, in someone without IBS, the brain just filters out normal background noise, food digesting, a little bit of gas moving around. But with IBS, that filter is totally broken. You develop something called visceral hypersensitivity. So normal, everyday digestion gets translated by these hyperactive nerves and sent straight to the brain as a severe, blaring pain alarm. And hey, if anyone ever tries to tell you this pain is just in your head, I want you to hit them with this staggering fact. 95% of your body's serotonin is produced right there in your gut. Yeah, that famous happiness hormone isn't just about mood. Down in the gut, serotonin is a key neurotransmitter that regulates pain signals and controls how fast or slow your intestines move. So when that chemical factory gets disrupted, your entire digestive rhythm just gets thrown into complete chaos.
So, let's talk about the four types and those hidden symptoms.
Because nerve signals affect gut motility differently in literally everyone, IBS is definitely not a one-size-fits-all condition. We generally categorize the four distinct suspects on the spectrum using the Bristol stool scale. First, we've got IBS-D, where hyperfast transit causes severe diarrhea and urgency. On the complete flip side, there's IBS-C, where hyper-slow transit leads to really painful constipation. Then you have IBS-M, which is this miserable mix that rapidly bounces between the two. And finally, IBS-U, an unclassified version that doesn't fit neatly into the other boxes, but trust me, it's just as disruptive. But we have to look closer, because beyond the pain and the really obvious bathroom changes, patients are often suffering in total silence from these hidden symptoms. We're talking extreme bloating, where your clothes suddenly don't fit by the end of the day, passing mucus, that constant, incredibly frustrating feeling of an incomplete evacuation, and even severe, crushing fatigue and sleep disturbances. These are the symptoms people rarely talk about enough, but they will completely drain your energy.
Moving on to diagnostic criteria, specifically Rome-4.
So, how exactly do doctors diagnose an invisible condition? Well, they use a very specific clinical framework called the Rome-4 criteria. A doctor can't just slap an IBS label on you after one bad stomach ache. To meet this criteria, you must have recurrent abdominal pain at least 1 day a week for the last 3 months. And crucially, that pain has to be combined with changes in how often you go to the bathroom, changes in the form of your stool, or pain that specifically improves or worsens when you go. That consistent long-term pattern, that is the fingerprint of IBS.
But here is where we need to talk about red flags and mimics. This is the major plot twist in our investigation, because sometimes that oversensitive alarm is actually detecting a real fire. We absolutely have to distinguish between functional IBS and what doctors call urgent red flags. This is so vital. IBS, no matter how excruciating it is tied to your waking state, and it does not cause physical damage. So, if you have diarrhea that literally wakes you up out of a deep sleep, or if you experience unexpected rapid weight loss, or if you ever see blood, Those are massive red flags. IBS never, ever causes bleeding. If you have those symptoms, it is not just IBS. And that brings us to why IBS is known as a diagnosis of exclusion. Before officially handing you an IBS diagnosis, a thorough doctor has to act like a bouncer and rule out the dangerous imposters. They need to run tests to make sure you aren't secretly dealing with celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, colorectal cancer, or a bacterial overgrowth known as SIBO. These mimics can look exactly like IBS on the surface, but they require entirely different treatments. To show you just how deceptive these mimics can be, check out this fascinating 2024 study published in the BMJ Open. Researchers looked at patients in Yemen who had been officially diagnosed with IBS. The finding, nearly half of them, 45.1% to be exact, didn't actually have a functional gut issue at all. They had a systemic, hidden malaria infection. Their immune systems were fighting a parasite in the blood, releasing massive amounts of inflammation that triggered the gut's alarm system, perfectly mimicking IBS. Mind-blowing, right? This completely blew researchers' minds, and it highlights the absolute necessity of using standard, cheap blood test biomarkers to catch these hidden invaders. We're talking about things like high NLR and PLR ratios. Think of these markers as little breadcrumbs left behind by an immune system at war. By simply looking at routine blood counts, doctors can spot systemic infections masquerading as IBS long before they cause severe damage.
So, looking ahead, let's talk about the journey to healing. Now that we've mapped out this mystery, it's time to talk solutions. But remember, this is just part 1 of our Explainer series. In part 2, we're going to dive deep into healing through food and the mind. We'll explore the shocking reality of the nocebo effect, where just thinking a food will hurt you can literally cause physical spasms in your gut, and we'll unpack mind-gut therapies. Then in part 3, we'll decode the highly targeted advanced medical treatments and medications that can actually quiet that alarm system for good.
Until then, we really want to hear your story in the comments. This condition thrives in silence, so let's get loud about it. Which symptom bothers you the most on a daily basis? And have you ever had to fight to get a proper diagnosis? Pushing past doctors who just kept telling you everything was normal? Let me know down below. Think about that incredible connection between your brain and your gut today, and I will see you in part 2.